The intersection of endurance sport, health, fitness, and life. Challenging conventional ideas and empowering people with the science of self-propelled motion. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast, hosted by Tony Rich.
Desria Holmes made swimming a priority for her family. Her daughter Madison and her son Mason are both enrolled in a program launched by USA Swimming that aims to get a more diverse group of young people in the water. 64% of black kids have little to no swimming ability, compared to 40% of white kids. And this has real consequences. A CDC report found that black kids are 5.5 times more likely to drown in a swimming pool than white kids.
When I saw the opportunity for my daughter to swim, and then my parents were able to see their granddaughter swim, they were actually crying because no one in our family swims like Madison. No one.
Communities of color typically do not gravitate towards swimming.
In fact, black children are 5 times more likely to drown than white children.
Quanisha Goodwill lives across the street from Washington Park. This pool was within walking distance for her, though for so many African American children, access to pools are limited.
I think one of the biggest problems is that the parents cannot afford to pay for swim lessons for their children.
Studies show that 70% of African American children and 60% of Hispanic children in metropolitan areas don't know how to swim. The number of drownings here in Milwaukee County support those statistics. In the last 5 years, a total of 6 children have drowned. 4 of them were children of color.
On this podcast, I will tackle the factors impacting swim participation and competence. And you'll hear a discussion about the qualitative report by that name. And we pay particular focus on underserved populations, which, as you heard from those clips, somewhere between 2/3 and 70%, depending upon the time and region the study's done, report no or low swimming ability. And so there's been a great deal of speculation surrounding why such disparities exist. Cost is one of the hypotheses, pool location, current and historical barriers to pools are another. And there are many other hypotheses around why we see this disparity. As always, I want to have discussions around the best science available on the topic, and insofar as it is possible, arrive at some data-centric observations that might inform action plans. I had to seek out the most qualified person that I believe is available to discuss the science in this area. And I do believe that I found that in Dr. Carol Irwin. She has a PhD in curriculum and instruction health education and a master's in sport pedagogy. She is an associate professor of physical education, teacher education in the College of Health Sciences at the University of Memphis. Currently, Dr. Irwin is the principal investigator for several USA swimming research studies, including constraints impacting minority swimming participation. This nationwide study was the first research study to determine minority youth swimming ability and dig deeper to explore possible reasons why these underserved populations drown at such high rates. We primarily have a conversation around Dr. Irwin and her team's May 2020 qualitative report. As mentioned, that's titled Factors Impacting Swimming Participation and Competence, and this qualitative report builds on a substantial breadth of previous findings and publishings. And so we have a broad conversation about the findings of the qualitative report. And bear in mind as well that Dr. Irwin has also taken action to solve some of the problems by becoming research chair of Splash Mid-South, a community-based program that supports diversity in swimming as well as decreasing drowning rates. So this is a very informative conversation, and I will put the links to the research papers in the show notes so you can go there and take a look at the findings. Regardless of your background, walk of life, ethnicity, you'll get something very valuable out of this podcast. I would offer that you should think about your own swim participation. Reflect on when you started swimming and why, and what were your influences. Think about how confident you are now around bodies of water and your ability to take action if you ever needed to, or help someone who needed help around a body of water. And if you have children, or thinking about having children, think about how much you would prioritize getting them in the water and at what age. So I won't delay you any further. My conversation with Dr. Carol Irwin on the factors impacting swim participation and competence. All right, I am on with Dr. Carol Irwin. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so the title of this podcast is Factors Impacting Swimming Participation. And I wanted to do a podcast on this topic to really highlight something that has been sort of under the microscope, and then we've placed a lot of heightened awareness around the issue of swimming participation, particularly in minority communities. I think we see underrepresented swimming participation, and I think it's fair to say that there is a health component to this. In my area in the Northeast, I've seen quite a few drownings, and particularly among underrepresented populations. Just this past summer, we saw quite a few. But even we see this sort of bubble up to even competitive swimming. If people tend to not swim as kids, they don't swim as adults. So I wanted to drill down on some of this. And when I was doing the research on who to talk to about this, your name kept coming up, you and your research colleagues, Jennifer Farr, Richard Irwin, and Todd Lane. Is Richard Irwin related to?
Yes, we are married.
Oh, okay.
And we had a lot of fun doing the research together. It was great having a partner in crime, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the research runs deep. Back in 2008, you had some research, constraints impacting minority swim participation. In 2010 through 2017, there were two big studies on youth swimming ability and associated factors in the United States. And recently, you've done a qualitative report, and this was May of 2020, and this is the most recent. So why don't we start by telling our listeners in your own words, your background, what drove you down the pathway to be a key researcher in this important body of work, and particularly focusing on minority populations.
Yeah, great. Because I think that's important in how the studies actually came out in the end. I was a physical education teacher for years and years, and finally finished my doctorate and became a research professor at the University of Memphis back in 2007. Mm-hmm. and didn't really think about swimming. I used to be a lifeguard WSI back in the day, but always had my children in swim lessons and tried to encourage them. My oldest daughter was on a swim team for a little while, but that's kind of like my personal entree into the swim world. But then in 2007, USA Swimming came calling, mainly because of my husband. I always have to give him credit. He's the one who really had that connection with USA Swimming, because a former student of his, he was a sport management professor at University of Memphis. So one of his students was at USA Swimming in the diversity group, and he had done research with my husband, and he said, you know what, I bet this would be a perfect survey type of researchable topic. So let's contact Dr. Irwin. And lo and behold, he said he would do it, but he really didn't. That wasn't his main line of research. So I was a brand new professor, and I thought this sounds very interesting. And so I kind of took it and ran, basically.
I see. Yeah, it's an important body of work. I myself, as a Black kid growing up in the inner city, poor kid growing up in the inner city, I didn't start swimming until age 30. And obviously I went on to become a master swimmer, a lifeguard, WSI, and then triathlete, Ironman triathlete. And now I coach other people. But I've seen this not only as a general issue. I mean, generally we see that adults don't know how to swim, and particularly if they didn't grow up swimming. But it's almost a much more pervasive case in the instance of minorities swimming. And just this summer in the Northeast, we had a young kid drown, and then a police officer drowned trying to save the young kid.
Oh, wow.
And the police officer, I think, was a Hispanic police officer. So let's start right in talking about the research. And if you can, talk about how you formulated the study, maybe talk about the problem statement that you and your fellow researchers took on, and factors impacting swimming participation, and what are some of the key statistics that will drive home the understanding of the problem to the listeners?
Sure. Originally, back in 2008 and 2010, we kind of uncovered a few major issues. We entered into this research with, the general kind of like, well, I know why African Americans don't learn how to swim. It's because of X or Y or Z. And it's like, well, that's fine. And, we'll ask a bunch of other people to make sure that that's a pretty solid possibility. And so we included a lot of those, maybe this is an issue kind of situation in the 2008 survey. And what we came up with out of the 2008 and then verified it with the 2010 study was that really the major problem was fear of drowning. And especially with the underserved communities, underserved children. And that became a factor because their parents told them to stay away from water because their parents didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
And that is something that as a WSI, I remember watching great fear of parents sitting in the bleachers watching their kids learning to swim because they were helpless. They couldn't, if they saw their child go underwater, there was, probably no way they could save that child because number one, they couldn't swim and they wouldn't get there in time. So it was there's a big fear factor with drowning and injury, especially in the underserved Black communities, Hispanic communities. And it's really just a pervasive legacy of fear.
Yeah, I can attest to that. And just in my own experience, and as they say, n equals one. I'm just one observation, but there's a cultural component for sure, absolutely. And as a youth, it never even dawned on me that swimming would be something fun to do as a Black kid growing up. I was concerned with basketball, and I was concerned with football. These were the things that we did because we were good at it.
Well, and it was fun.
It's fun, yeah.
And whereas swimming, it can be fun too, but it's also, I think, a life skill. I think every child should learn how to swim, very much like every child should learn how to cross the street.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah. And then there's that cultural component. So,
sure.
And the other thing is, and we can talk about it later, about how money comes into play, time comes into play, right? Because Red Cross has a program, YMCA has a program, but those programs are not free. And then how does that play into it? So I want to get into that at some point. But before that, let's talk about the research in the May 2020 study. How did you build off of all of the previous work that was done in 2008, 2010, and what was the aim, and how did this qualitative report build off of the previous work? And then if you can comment on what are the limitations, if there are any.
Sure. The 2017 study was USA Swimming came to us and said, we want to check to see how underserved and at-risk youth are dealing with, the information that was gleaned in 2010. And plus on top of it, USA Swimming wanted to check their own programming, that they had put a lot of money in from donors to teach kids that needed to learn how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one part of it. But they also said, we want to check also middle income rather than just low income. We want to check to see how they are learning how to swim. That group is handling the situation. And it was very fascinating to compare the middle income or upper income. There was it was a little bit above what median income was our groups that we were able to get and compare them to the lower income. And, they were taking their babies into the water and dunking them and, getting them to learn how to swim at a very, very young age and trying to matriculate them into a swim team.
Right.
So their pathway into learning how to swim were a lot different than others. So it was kind of fascinating. And to be honest with you, that's how I taught my children to learn how to swim. I took them into the pool when they were infants and blew on their faces and dunked them down underneath the water. But that's because I was a WSI and I had learned, other kind of techniques to teach very young kids. So obviously kids, middle income and up, were learning how to swim. So there was a huge income factor that we kind of uncovered with that situation in regards to comparison. We knew there was an income issue from the 2010, but just talking to people in focus groups, the truth comes out in focus groups. And it was just completely revealing. So that it was a good check.
And which cities were involved in the focus groups?
The cities in 2017 were Houston, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, and Memphis. We had a little bit of Los Angeles, but they kind of backed out towards the end. We had some surveys. But the focus groups were those four cities: Houston, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, and Memphis.
And so then you have a set of questions that, and then you pose those surveys to did they know what the study was about for instance, is it blind to that, or did you talk to the survey participants on what the study was about?
Right. What we did is we would go to each city and we would train YMCA staff to do the survey distribution and collection on their own. So we told them to go ahead and tell them we're trying to learn more about swimming and what people go through, and do they continue swimming. And so they were very honest about it, and they were very good about it too. And we trained them in regards to, if someone feels like some of these questions are too sensitive, to just say, skip that question, or if you want to stop, you can stop. And really the only sensitive part on the surveys were basically designating what racial category you fell into.
Right.
But we also gave them options to not check the box, but then describe, what your racial description is on your own part if you want to. So we ended up with, let me see, I think about 1,400 surveys from just those 4 cities, which was amazing. The YMCA staff did a great job of being able to get as many as they could, which is great.
Right. And so you have the scale here. And so imagine a sort of what they call a Likert scale, so on one end of the scale, you have, I avoid getting near / in water other than to bathe. And then all the way at the end of the scale is, I can swim many lengths without stopping on a swim team, or could be on a team, or could be on a swim team. And then there are many points in between. So that, I think, is a helpful way to do it, because oftentimes when you ask someone, can they swim, their definition of swim is different from yours.
Right.
Right.
I remember vividly in Houston in the 2008 study. Houston, we repeated Houston just to kind of check too, to see if it was similar, which it was, which was good. But in the 2008 study, I can remember going into an after school care at a middle school that the YMCA ran. And the staff member, we just kind of sat in the back, and the staff member said, okay, we're going to do a survey about swimming. How many of y'all can swim? And everybody raised their hands. And she did a great job. She said, I know you can't swim. I know you can't swim. She started pointing out at all these people that had raised their hand. And she said, there is a breakdown of levels of swimming in this, and you have to be honest. You have to promise me that you will be honest on this and tell the truth on this survey. So yes, you're right. Everybody thinks they can swim, even if it's just splashing around in the shallow end.
Yeah. What's some of the other limitations in this? I can't think of many, but if you have a swimming scale for them to gauge themselves, and I think the only I think you mentioned that there's some questions that someone may prefer not to answer, but I can't see many other additional limitations.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. It was survey research. And like I said, we were very open to, like, if you don't want to answer that question, don't answer it. But we encourage you to keep going and finish up the rest of it. And we try to encourage them about how there's an, overabundance of drownings that occur in certain communities, and especially communities of color. And we want to stop that. We want to figure out how to respond to that by, getting kids to learn how to swim rather than just never learning how to swim and be at risk. So we tried to, get the staff, as well as we did a lot of surveys in Memphis and a few other places. So we tried real hard to make sure that we just want to find out, how you feel about swimming truthfully. Just have to be truthful.
Right. So it says in your report, over the years, most swimming performance results changed for the better, including all participants. Approximately 61.4 reported no or low swimming skill level in 2010. The results from the most recent study showed that 49.3% of the sample indicated they had no or low swimming level. So that dropped overall, which is good. But then when you look at specific racial or ethnic groups in 2010, the no or low swimming levels for African American children were 68.9% as compared to 66.5% from the 2017 sample. So
there wasn't much improvement there, was there?
Exactly. So not much improvement. That means that over 2/3, approximately close to 2/3 of African American children report low or no swimming ability, and that is a staggering number.
It is, and I was happy to see that it improved. Compared to the 2010 study, but and it improved on almost all categories, which we told USA Swimming, this is good. Your programs are working. You just have to be patient and work in other communities that need help too. So they were pretty happy with that. But you're right. You think that every child should learn how to swim, in a make-believe world, I guess.
Right.
But then we just got to keep working towards that.
Yeah, and okay, there's many factors at play, and I always think that many reasons for things are multifactorial, and so just trying to figure out, the specific factors, including some of the intangibles that you can't put your fingers on. So, what were some of the general findings, including reasons we see lower swimming ability?
Sure. The most significant was fear of drowning. That was definitely the most significant. And lack of parental encouragement was also a variable that we measured. And even if you were afraid, but if you still went ahead and supported your child to learn how to swim, that was very unusual. Usually it's fear and parents saying no to swimming, basically. Mm-hmm. And then also some appearance issues were cited as well, the hair and the skin issue and eyes too, which is one of the reasons why I swim, but I never swam competitively. But I've worn contacts all my life. So when you go swimming without contacts, you're blind. So, it wasn't just the typical African-American hair issue and skin issue. It was also other appearance issues too. And then also absolutely financial issues, access issues. I remember a focus group person saying one time that they tried to go to a different pool one time that was outside of their neighborhood, and they felt, uncomfortable and not welcome.
Right.
So they went back to the pool in their neighborhood that wasn't as clean and wasn't as well managed as the other one because they just didn't feel comfortable. And that makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah. So. You mentioned the hair issue, and I can tell you from some experience that there is that is a deterrent, particularly to some Black women. When I was a kid, I used to watch my mother and sisters with all the things that they did with their hair. There was something called a hot comb, where they would take it was literally a metal comb that you would stick on the stove. And you would heat it up, and that comb would get literally red hot. some of the metal would start to, like on TV, when you see metal heat up, it turns red. Sometimes it would get that red, and they would grab that comb and then strand by strand, straighten each strand of their hair with the hot comb. I remember that, and I remember sitting watching that as a young boy, going, "My goodness, that's coming really close to your head."
They are very brave.
Sometimes it would even get too close and nick. You'd see girls come to school with the little nicks, and I knew exactly what that was. And then obviously there's chemical relaxers, right? The chemical relaxers, you go into chlorine pool, that will take all of the chemical out. So that's a deterrent to some women, right? So Black women getting into chlorinated pools, the hair issue. And I don't know how you solve that. So Simone Manuel talks about that. Simone Manuel obviously was the first woman to get a gold medal in the 100-meter freestyle. And the fact that she's been the only woman to win an individual medal in the Olympic freestyle, it's just, that was 2016. That's incredible. That in itself is telling. And
because I've often said, whatever group is not learning how to swim, they will never be able to swim in high school on a high school team. They will never be able to get a college scholarship with swimming.
Right.
They will never be able to, be employed in the aquatic industry. I mean, it leaves them out of so much,
right?
And just by learning how to swim.
Yeah. And if you don't learn how to swim as a youth, chances are you're not going to go to the high school swim team and try out, right? The coach is going to ask you, okay, do you know the 4 competitive strokes?
Yes.
No, I don't know that. Well, we don't teach you how to swim. You got to come here knowing how to swim. So go to learn and then come back. Maybe, that's what they would say. So if you're not versed in swimming as a youth, chances are you're not going to be a competitive swimmer later on in life. And that's even teaching triathletes now universally overall. That's an issue. I think it's an issue of all populations, but specifically, it's an issue in minority populations for sure. Again, I didn't start until 30 years old. I walked into the YMCA and told the instructor that I wanted to train for the Ironman, and then I signed up for something called intermediate stroke, and she said, you want to do the Ironman and you don't know how to swim. But obviously, in my instance, I went on to be a lifeguard, WSI, master swim coach, and a master swim instructor. So it's doable. It's just, you need to have the that start as a youth to
after being in like 1,000 million pools doing surveys, watching other instructors teach kids, I've decided that we're teaching kids the wrong way to swim. That we're teaching them using the competitive stroke model.
Yes.
And we need to get them to love swimming and to enjoy swimming and to feel comfortable in the water. And then move into the competitive strokes.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my feeling on getting kids into the pool, making it fun. You don't even need WSIs. All you need is, an instructor who's old enough, maybe someone from the drama department, and just to have fun and play games and do fun things to make them feel more comfortable in the water.
Yeah.
And
WSI,
then,
by the way, being for the listeners, water safety instructors, Red Cross water safety instructors.
Yes.
but yeah, you're right. Getting kids in and having fun with being in the water, doing simple things in the water. Now, Red Cross and YMCA, by the way, have programs that are sort of 6-stage programs where they start you. I mean, I think you can even do parent and infant classes starting at, I think it's 6 months,
Yes.
6 months old or something. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it's very structured, and then your child will pass the 6 stages, and then if they pass the 6 stages, they're a teenager, and then maybe you can go on to swim team, but swim team is expensive. Last time I looked, it's about $3,000 a year for swim team.
Yeah.
There's got to be another avenue,
right,
where we can just get kids in the pool, liking it, and learning some basic strategies.
Right. And we have a program now in Memphis, mainly because of a person who's has a story very much like you. He used to own a business. He's a lawyer, and his daughter and his son were on the USA Swim competitive club team on campus here at the University of Memphis. And they were the only African-American kids on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And he's became kind of aware of the situation. And we were doing the national research at that same time. Well, the first day of summer season, outdoor pool opening, I think it was May 31st, 2 African-American adolescent males drowned in 2 different pools. And that set the city on fire. And we did a top-down kind of situation where the government closed all the pools, lifeguards had training, and the pools were closed until like the end of July. So most of the summer they couldn't swim outside in those pools. And then they had to have pool cards to get into the pool. And it was very restrictive. We had a kind of grassroots bottom up situation, and Anthony Norris, who the guy that I'm talking about, I know him. Yeah. He jumped in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a developmental swim team, but we're going to have a Make a Splash program where we get kids in the pool, teach them how to swim. And then we also have an option for developmental swim team, where they can move to, very easy, short 25-meter races and learn strokes real well. And that has really taken off in Memphis. The competitive club team that was on campus that Anthony started with his kids is now about 50% African-American. And it is so wonderful to go over and watch their swim meets or their swim practices to see all the diversity in that pool. It really has made me feel great as a researcher.
Yeah, that's amazing, Carol. It really shows that all the work that you're doing and your team and your husband, you guys are doing some great work, and it's paying off.
It really is. And it's a team. It's Anthony. It's the Children's Hospital in Memphis, Le Bonheur. It's the Ben Hooks Institute on campus, who has made sure that we research and keep track of the numbers so we get sponsors. It's really been working well. And we've taught probably over 12,000 kids how to swim since back in 2008.
Mm-hmm. Wow, incredible. And that has improved. We still obviously have quite a bit to go, right?
Yes.
2/3 of African-American kids report low or no swimming ability. So, I've had conversations with this on social media, and people have posed this to me many times, this question of why we don't see as many African Americans swimming, either as children or adults. The parents
Yes.
feeling about swimming generally. But what are some of anything else that you can lend to the listeners on some of the behavioral characteristics of the parents that lend it to strong swimmers, youth swimmers versus not strong youth swimmers? Is there anything else that you can point to?
Yeah, well, the not strong, I would say it's that multi-generational fear factor that has kind of taken over in that regard. But I think because of information, because of education, because this has been kind of out there in the mainstream, that is starting to not be as pervasive as it used to. So I think that legacy of fear, we need to try to get rid of that somehow. And that goes to encouraging their kids to learn how to swim at schools, getting special programs where they can get free swimming lessons, having the water safety instructor of that class walk over to the bleachers and say, they're going to be completely safe. Everything's fine. But this is what happens sometimes when kids start crying. What you need to do is sit in the bleachers and just with your thumb up and saying, you're going to be okay. And so prepping the parents sometimes is kind of nice in that situation. Just that little tiny, thing that the instructor can do to kind of manage the situation. So I think some of that training needs to happen with WSIs too, that, we're trying to get kids to learn how to swim effectively. And sometimes parents will just pull them out at that point if they're crying. So we want to keep them in the water as long as we can. Couple of things we learned from the focus groups was that will help. And that is to have a trusted messenger relay the information to communities and neighborhoods. People will listen to that trusted messenger and hopefully will follow up with that with swim lessons. And then also really focus in on the drowning issue that do you want your child to drown? We need to keep them safe. This is a life skill that they should be gaining, and you're keeping them from getting this life skill. And then also, a couple of people in Boston said, we need to have Elmo go out and learn how to swim. We need to have this on TV for the very, very young children. So they start getting that kernel of interest in swimming and being able to control that part of their life as well. So and also the WIC counselors, women, infant, child counselors. We need to start teaching them about when they're taking a bath, when kids are taking a bath, putting their face in the water and blowing bubbles, just kind of getting them used to water and that it's not scary and you can control this if you really want. Yeah.
And finances and time, the location of facilities, obviously these are all part of the multifactorial problem. I think someone who living in the inner city who's not making a lot of money and doesn't have a lot of time because they're working 2 jobs. How does that? I mean, because maybe there's some form of program that can be instituted, but the facility location and finances could be a big headwind to this.
Yes, it can. And so that's always an issue, and trying to get, groups together to, transportation is a real big issue. The only issue that it wasn't an issue was in Boston because the YMCA was right off of one of the train stops. And so you could take the subway or the train if you can to some of these places, but a lot of times it's not the right stop. So you have to take a car. And that can be an issue. Now, our little developmental program has an option for, would you want a carpool? And we can try to put people together for carpooling. So that's a situation that is helping, but you're right. The financial issues are still a problem, even not just for African-American kids, but all kids.
Right. Yeah. And I always said if I had unlimited resources, I'd build an aquatics facility, a master swim aquatics facility, and a recreational swim facility in every inner city. Because you go to inner cities, you see tons of fields, basketball courts, but you don't see, unless it's a YMCA or a boys club, you don't see many facilities where someone can walk in and get instruction. You just don't.
Right. I know a lot of people said our study really wasn't a very good study because we used the YMCA. YMCA is pro swimming. And I would always say, first of all, getting into schools is incredibly difficult. And I know that, because I used to be a curriculum coordinator in Memphis City Schools, which was the 20th largest school district in the country. It's impossible to get into the schools. We tried a little bit with Philadelphia, and it was just like, we are not going to be able to get in. So YMCA stepped up and did that. And I always tell people I would prefer to go into the schools and do it. But in our situation, we had to do it as well as we could. And we went into the YMCA. So the numbers that we got, they might be, pretty conservative.
Yeah.
But the conservative 69% African Americans don't have very good swimmability or no swimmability. That's scary enough right there. So
I see what you mean. So you're saying that taking the results in the YMCA may have some form of survivorship bias, meaning those are the ones that are more likely to swim.
Yeah, I think it's actually worse than 69%. And anyways, until the CDC puts a question on their youth risk behavior survey about swimmability, we probably won't know what kids can actually do and don't do.
If you were to force me just on my own experience, I would say that some of this is chalked up to the reason why we don't see many African American kids swim and adults swim is the same reason we don't see many African American hockey players or lacrosse players. There's an effect that you can't really put your finger on. It's just sort of the feeling that it's just not of interest. I don't know what to call it. I sort of loosely call it cultural preference.
Yeah. Again, it's generational, because your parents probably didn't play lacrosse.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Lacrosse, swimming, hockey, these are things that I just did not even think about. It was football, basketball, and track and field because I was good at them, and that's what everybody else was doing. And there's high visibility of athletes like this, right? So there's that, and I don't know what that is and how to put a finger on it, but there is.
Well, and there's finances in lacrosse and hockey,
right? Hockey, same thing. I mean, hockey moms will tell you it's not cheap, and it's a lot of equipment, a lot of time to get to facilities, things like that. So. But I think if you were to ask, if you were to survey African Americans on what interests you the most, it wouldn't be these things. So, there's many different things interconnected. It's sort of like a 4-dimensional chess to try to figure out how all of these run together.
Right. And to me, it's like, yes, I would love kids to learn all the different sports and have all that possibility in their life. But swimming is special because I think it's still a life skill.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And again, I always compare it to learning how you teach your kids how to cross the street, right? Safety issues. Same thing with swimming, because they're going to be in a situation one day where they're in a pool somewhere in the backyard of a friend, or, who knows where they're at. And they can learn how to save themselves if they get in a tough situation.
Right.
So,
and what we've seen is that pools are one of the most dangerous thing to a child in this world. I mean, you look at the number of deaths from drownings. It's staggering how many children per year don't reach the age of, say, 9 because of they just didn't make it back to the wall successfully.
right.
I'm going to put the link to the most recent qualitative study and then the 2017 study in the show notes for our listeners.
Great.
What can you say, any final thoughts to the listeners on this issue? And is there anything that we can look forward to in the future with any of your research?
Well, I hope to see more, underserved kids getting into triathlons, and and because that's one thing that Anthony Norris learned how to swim because of triathlons. So your story was very related to me in regards to that. But I just think every child should have a chance to do what they want to do, to be what they want to be. And if they don't learn how to swim, that is completely forbidden. Then anything to do with swimming is not going to happen. So every child should learn how to swim. And that's my big message when I, want to finish up with a presentation or a talk. Every child should learn how to swim.
Right. Yeah. For safety reasons, above all, that you don't want to be another statistics, as we saw many this summer who made the summer of 2021 in my area, the Northeast, was a very sad summer. We saw so many drownings. So, I think triathlon is one of the spots where it's bringing people around, because people are finally saying as adults, well, I want to do this event. I guess I have to do something that I never did or never put any time to as a kid. So that's one of the bright spots of the participation of the sport of triathlon, is that it's forcing adults to learn how to swim. So that's a bright part.
Well, you are very brave.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. You've been very generous with your time, and thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to spread the word.
Thanks again to Dr. Carol Irwin, one of the key researchers that have been working hard to raise awareness on this issue and to implement solutions to try to improve the numbers. I would invite all the listeners to go to the show notes and grab the links for her and her team's research, as well as all of the bio information about her. This issue definitely strikes close to home. I was one of those underserved youths that didn't swim, had no interest in swimming, couldn't swim. And I have triathlon to thank for bringing me to swimming later in life, and then, of course, master swimming as well. The statistics are troubling in underserved populations for sure. More broadly, male, female, young, old, regardless of your ethnicity, what region of the world you live in, swimming proficiency is monumentally important, because it just might save your life one day. And many of you that listen to this podcast, I'm sort of pushing at an open door, because many of you have also been introduced to swimming through triathlon and master swimming. It's an important message, though, because many of you either have kids or maybe will have kids. And when you look at the statistics, there are few things more dangerous to a child than water. When you look at the rates at which youths will drown. So I am hopeful that all of our listeners would prioritize swimming for their children insofar as they may have children. I know there are people that listen to this podcast all over the world, but here in the United States, we have the Red Cross, we have the YMCA, and as we talked about on the podcast, both Red Cross and the YMCA have programs, they have parent and child programs that start as early as 6 months, where they put the parent and the child in the water together to assimilate children, and then from there they both have programs, staged programs, stage 1 through stage 6, where you can develop a child through a system of instruction, feedback, and progression, and even develop them all the way up to swim team as preteens or teens. And again, I'm not saying that every child should go through that entire system. You may never know what a child likes or dislikes. They may decide later on, you know what, I'm done with swimming. I'm going to go play basketball or football or tennis or whatever it is. But at least the system is there to start and give that child the early basics and developmentals so that they can learn a life skill. Undoubtedly, there are some listeners right now saying, yeah, Tony, but that stuff is time consuming and it's costly. It's not free, which is true. Absolutely. And I would just offer that in the United States, for instance, the Red Cross will have something called the Centennial Campaign, where they will come to different regions and actually provide services to disadvantaged communities. And if you don't have a lot of resources, they will actually provide swimming instruction and resources, either deeply discounted or sometimes even free based upon need. YMCAs will also have similar swimming instruction scholarships, so I might suggest that you check with one in your region. And if you're international, I would bet if you looked, you may be able to find similar options that are provided by our Red Cross and YMCAs here in the United States. And the last thing that I want to leave you with is the importance of being patient with swimming. For those of you that are adults and looking to increase your proficiency, far too often as a coach, I get swimmers or potential swimmers who either get frustrated or they want to see results immediately. And then anyone who knows anything about skills that are technique driven, you actually have to be a little patient, and it takes time. But it's not a death sentence that you didn't learn these skills as a youth. And that's a very common misconception about swimming. Oh, well, I didn't learn this as a kid, so therefore I'm doomed forever. That's certainly not true. Take it from me, someone who almost a couple decades now walked into a local YMCA to take a intermediate stroke class, and sitting here today, a master swim coach, a lifeguard, a water safety instructor, a triathlon coach, a multi-time Ironman triathlon finisher, and even set a Guinness World Record in that very same pool where I started taking swim lessons. Okay, thank you for listening. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast.
Follow Event Horizon Endurance Sport on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for training programs and services. To become a member of our Endurance Institute or for a complete archive of podcasts, log on to our website, eventhorizon.tv.